Have you ever wondered if you should keep all your money invested during retirement, or is it safe to pull all of this funds out? In today's video, we're going to be diving into why you should keep your money invested and really throughout retirement. It is a very important decision that can really change and affect retirement in its entirety. So let's be honest, retirement is not the finish line. It is really a starting point of an entire new journey. And your money needs to work for you just as hard as you did. Here's the truth. Many retirees move into far too conservative portfolios, really moving and getting too conservative too soon, shifting everything to cash, shifting it to bonds, even shifting it to traditional financial institutions where they will not outpace inflation. Then when you start looking at the effect of inflation, healthcare costs, and longevity can eat away on your total nest egg faster than you ever imagined. So today I'm going to break down the reasons why we're going to keep this money invested, why the strategy matters, how to avoid those common pitfalls that we've seen, and a practical way to make your money last decades. Now, when we start thinking of retirement, retirement is a new chapter. It is not the end. Now, most people picture retirement thinking about stopping and working, simply drawing from their investment. But here's the thing. During retirement, and if you retire at the age of 65, you could have 20, 30, even 40 years of retirement. And we have to make sure that that nest egg is going to suffice for entirety. It's not a second vacation. It is an entire lifetime that you have to be invested in the market. If you retire at 65 and live until you're 95, that money needs to survive for 30 years without running out. Keeping your funds invested, and there has been a crazy amount of studies that have been really showing today that if you keep your portfolio growing, if you keep it invested, it will offset inflation. It will offset the lifestyle creep that we've seen, meaning that during retiring and during your retirement years, you are not going to run out of money. That is the number one fear among retirees, is running out of that money that they had set aside for retirement or having to go back to work. And the big reason for this is the compound effect. Now, compounding doesn't retire. Compounding is, of course, the secret sauce of investing. And for this, we look at Warren Buffett. When you think of Warren Buffett at the age of 65, if he would have taken his portfolio, the multi-millions he had, moved into something very conservative, we would not know the billionaire as we see today, because that portfolio would have just rolled over and kept millions in there. Just because you retire doesn't mean that it stops working for you. It is really the rewarding for staying invested in the portfolio. Now, imagine you go into retirement, you have $1 million portfolio, you put it in the cash at that 1%, you only earn $10,000 a year on that $1 million portfolio, not even enough to cover inflation. You're actually going to be about 2% behind. If you keep it in a portfolio, let's say 6 to 8%, you could be looking at $60,000 to $80,000 a year versus the $10,000. Now, me personally, and really the big takeaway, staying invested with a portion of the portfolio keeps that money multiplying even when you make withdrawals. Now, for me personally, I have seen this a lot. I've been in financial institutions for almost 20 years, and we have people that retire from education and they pull that 403B. We see people that retire from the county. They pull all their money out. It goes into IRA accounts. And guess what? They leave it at traditional institutions. It is not invested. It is not growing. We fast forward 5, 10, 15 years. All of a sudden, a majority of that investment account they had has already been eaten. All of it, or majority of it, for a lot of people, is already gone because it's not growing again in the method that they need to. Because, of course, when we start thinking about it, the danger of playing it too safe. This is what we see. A lot of retirees think that safety means keeping a savings account. Safety means keeping it in cash. However, they are not taking into account inflation. So essentially, if you're keeping it in cash, you are losing about 2.8% every year. If inflation stays about that average 3%, prices will double in 24 years mathematically. So think about it. If you're buying something that costs $50,000 today, then when you get to age 89, so we're fast forwarding 24 years, that same thing will now cost $100,000. Meaning, if you're going conservative, might be very secure for the short run, but in the long run, your money is silently losing that buying power, which is important. It's the reason why staying balanced and staying invested with stocks and bonds. And I'm not saying in here, honestly, when we start looking at managing risk, which is huge, don't be 100% in stocks, not 100% in ETFs. If you're 65, 75, 85, we're saying risk management is the key. But also with that goal is really the balance between them. When we start thinking about retiring again, let's say the age of 65, you take your portfolio that has, 100% of stocks, ETFs, you're in growth, you're in a couple different ETFs, and overall shifting it gradually from a very growth heavy portfolio into one that has a mix of equity, looking at growth and still getting growth, possibly looking at bonds, possibly looking at dividend paying investments, and really have the stability in there. So there's a bucket strategy that they kind of talk about. The short-term bucket, this is going to be the 1 to 3 years, really keeping it a little bit more liquid. This is going to cover your living expenses. And of course, this is going to be a supplement to Social Security, going to be your supplement into a pension. We know roughly the 4% rule that we've talked about before is now about 4.7%. And you want to make sure that you have that short-term bucket for money that you'll need. Now, the mid-term bucket, this is looking at those really focusing on in the dividend ETFs, possibly looking at bonds. However, personally, if you do your research about bonds unfortunately really do underperform by a very significant amount. Right now, for a majority of bonds that we have, you can find a high yield savings account that is almost paying the exact same or even paying more than we see traditionally with bonds. Meaning, if you're keeping it in cash, if you're keeping it in a high yield savings versus having it in bonds, the high yield savings accounts, again, in some instances, are paying a considerable more. And then, of course, being a little bit more conservative, looking at these blue chip companies, thinking of something like the Schwab US dividend ETF. There are a couple different things in there that when you really are during retirement. And then we have long-term. This is your stocks. This is those growth ETFs, looking at the VOO, looking at the QQQ. You want to keep a majority of the funds still really invested in the market. That way you can go ahead and build and you can get it. This way you're not forced to sell any of those investments. If you do need money, if there's a market downturn, the growth bucket still has time to recover if by chance there is a market downturn. And you're also seeing growth within the portfolio, and you're living off safer, shorter term investments, which again, the 1 to 3 years of possibly having in cash or having those those really low structured ETFs, possibly looking at some other alternatives, because of course you want to leave your legacy. This is something we've talked about before when it comes to generational wealth. The reason to stay invested, longevity. People are living longer. When you think, hey, I'm going to retire at 65, by 75, I'm going to be gone. Then it is 30 years later and you're still here. 35, 40 years later, you're 105 years old. That means your retirement plan has to support you for those decades. For many, leaving a financial legacy is exactly what they do, including myself. Whether it's children, my grandchildren, really charities is a majority of retirees' goals. Staying investment and really staying invested ensures that your wealth does in fact continue to grow for the future generations. So guys, bottom line, and I always love to cover this, retirement is not a time to abandon all your investments. We even look at a lot of target date funds. Unfortunately, for target date funds, when it hits that target date year, majority of it, and we have seen everything from 30, 40, 50, even 60% move into bonds. Those bonds for the next 10, 20, 30 years are not going to outpace inflation. So unfortunately, it is really about a strategic investment and really having some of your funds, those funds still invested versus moving it all to a different, really a different investment strategy. Keeping the money working, you protect yourself from inflation, extending your savings, creating opportunity for that long-term growth. If this video helped you in any way, definitely do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, more financial insight, drop a comment down below what you guys think. Are you planning to stay invested like I am during retirement? And I absolutely do. Do you feel a lot safer moving into cash? Let me know exactly what you're thinking, what you think about staying invested during retirement, and I'll catch you in the next